Hopefully you can see it. All right. Okay, so let's get it started. Welcome everyone. I'm super excited. Wait, you can't see it? Okay. So you can see my screen, assuming that.
Yeah, we see it.
Okay. Awesome. So welcome everyone. I'm really excited to speak at the second Glovo Tech Conference and share our journey with the Microsites platform. Overall, I try to summarize everything to be accessible for not only technical like front-end engineers, but also for back-end, mobile, product managers, data, whatever, you name it. But there will be some technical details just to be a bit techy. So before we get started, let me introduce myself. For those who don't know me, this is actually me in my natural habitat. My name is Papp. It's pronounced like the mate tea. So it's pretty good pretty easy to pronounce it. I'm currently living in Barcelona, but originally from Hungary. I've been in Glovo for about 2.5 years now. Initially started in Papp. Back in the day, it was called Content and Pricing, and later on transitioned to web platform actually. I'm really passionate about all the things around tech, hot news, and also about productivity, time management, because deep in my heart, I'm a bit lazy and I try to do everything as much efficient as possible. And as you can tell by the picture, I'm really into specialty coffee and I try to brew that at home. But if you find me in the office and ask for me to grab a coffee, most probably I'll say yes if it's not in the office. So let's see today's agenda. If we were live in a live stage, I would ask to raise your hands if you know what is this logo or what is this website. But since we're not, actually assuming that some of you might heard or see this website or visited it before. It's a very popular tech/startup focused news website called Hacker News, even though they're not speaking about hacking stuff. It's one of the most visited websites if you want to read news about the tech industry. On the other side, the community is not that friendly or not always that friendly. It could be a bit skeptic, pessimistic sometimes. For example, when Dropbox launched back in the day, they said that it was going to be a huge failure. So I try to wrap my head around and try to organize this talk. What if we just submit the idea of Microsites Platform or the current state that we are in to this website? Let me move the camera a bit here yeah, okay. So this is what I'm going to talk about. First, I'll actually explain what is a microsite. Then we get into the details why or what was the reason why we initially started to work on this platform or this solution. Then I will explain the current state, where we are, how did we end up being here, and last but not least, the future plans and what is the goal with this platform. So microsite. What is a microsite? You might be thinking that, oh, another technical term with a micro prefix like microservice, micro front end. It's fancy to put just micro whatever, right? According to Wikipedia, and I'm going to read it out loud, a microsite is an individual web page or a small cluster of pages which are meant to function as a discrete entity within an existing website or to complement an offline activity. It can have its own domain name or subdomain. Okay, sure, not bad, but it's a bit dry, it's a bit complicated, so let's try to visualize it. What is a microsite in our understanding and in terms of Glovo? So let's see some examples of microsites, existing microsites nowadays in Glovo. For example, our about page or like the corporate website. It's mostly about discovering, you as a visitor, you can discover what is Glovo as the company, what we do, our impact, our future plans, life at Glovo, etc., etc. Or the Glovo Concepts website. It's a website mainly targeted to showcase our different concepts, formerly known as virtual brands, I think, that we launched before. Then we have another website, which is pretty much a landing page for couriers if you want to work at Glovo, you can just register here and you can apply for a position. And last but not least, this is a pretty new microsite. It's actually really beautiful for a curious pledge. I'm pretty sure that you heard about it. So overall, in our understanding, a microsite, it could be any site which is mostly static or not frequently changing, like not every second, every minute, every 10 minutes. It's not connected to our backend system or backend services. And it's actually not part of our core apps. So you can think about microsites as landing pages, marketing websites, targeted to a temporary campaign like Valentine's Day, Black Friday, and so on. So after this definition, it's kind of easy to guess what is actually not a microsite. I couldn't fit into that bucket. For example, our customer web app. It's not really a microsite because it interacts with our backend system. It changes rapidly. It could be personalized. It has authentication, authorization, and so on. And our admin panel is also not a microsite, not even micro anymore. So within this talk, unfortunately, we're not going to cover any of these or our core apps or any future possibilities with those. Okay, after all, you might be asking that, okay, we already have micro frontends. What's the difference? And the difference is quite slight, I would say, because there are a lot of similarities between these two concepts. So overall, both of their goals is to slice up a big monolithic solution into more consumable pieces. Both are built on top of modern frameworks like React, Vue, Angular, whatever, you name it. And both emphasize the importance of having independent build, deployment, and independent responsibilities. The differences I like in terms of microsites, the biggest piece or the smallest piece, the undividable piece is a website or a page or actual page. When we're in micro frontends, you can have multiple components within the same page to different domains, dedicated to different domains, and you can share state between them, but it's not that common in terms of microsites. And the microsites are not meant to solve organizational challenges. They're more focused towards non-technical people launching different websites that are not really stateful, have any super complex business logic, etc., etc. So, since we're aware of what is a microsite, why did we even start work on this problem? Let's say today is the 18th of November, right? Culture Day is around the corner. Let's say that we want to build or launch a website. We can call it microsite. But we want to build a website to track and vote for the best costume at the Culture Day, and we want to organize a dance-off battle between countries. Let's see what are our options right now. As a potential solution, we can always outsource this problem to a third-party agency. There are a lot of the market. We already work with a couple of with them, so it's pretty easy to find one. Another one could be to, yeah, I'm not going to outsource it. I'm just use a site builder like WordPress or Wix or Webflow or even Google Sites. They're quite capable to do so. And the last one, and I use a bit of opacity here because it's not that common, that we use some sort of custom development and we build it in-house. Historically speaking, most of the time, we either opt in to use the first or the second example because of the lack of resource or resource in quotes, and the tech resource were focused to work on different other initiatives. So let's discover the pros and cons of each approach. Let's start with the agencies. Even though there are some pros like complete customizability and well, this is one of the most important stuff in if you work with agency, that you can really pretty much customize your website however you want. But I mostly listed the cons of this approach because in general, working with a third-party agency requires a lot of time, and it could be a huge process. Imagine that you as a stakeholder in Glovo, you want to build a website, and then you need to find the agency, You need to keep in touch with their project manager. Most probably they have other projects to work on. I'm an engineer. Some of us are engineers here. We all know that estimations can be a bit skewed. So you cannot really rely on those. Then what if they have their in-house design team, or should we bring the design? It's gonna be sometimes inconsistent with our look and feel, with the Glovo's design guidelines, etc., etc. On the other hand, it's really hard to oversee their progress, their end result, the artifacts that they're providing. Sometimes they use their infra to host it. Sometimes we need to host it. If we need to host it, we need to make sure to maintain it, etc., etc. There are a lot of legal and security risks, SEO cannibalization, and last but not least, it's really, really expensive. Then you can say, sure, I'm gonna save some money and just use an existing website builder. Fair enough. Most probably it's gonna be faster and you have more control on the whole process. But as always, there are some trade-offs, such as limited customizability option. So you might get a team from a store, customize it, change the colors, and so on and so on. But what if you want to launch another website and another one and another one? You need to do it over and over and again. Their offerings, or one of their biggest offerings, actually this is how they make money, is to provide a a managed solution to host the websites. So you either need to pay for that, or if you don't, then we as Glovo need to host the websites. That can be really complicated to host. Then it comes with a lot of maintenance, security risk, etc. And not speaking of the quality and the performance, these are bloated websites with their own custom solution. It can have a lot of negative impact on the SEO, speaking of core web vitals and performance. So after all, we identified more or less 40 plus existing sites or microsites within Glovo, built by either a third-party agency or a site builder tool that can either have or don't have any owner. Approximately, it's a super high-level estimation. At least we spend 1 million euros per year on these providers / services, which is, in my opinion, a bit expensive. But I think it could be even more expensive. So we were pretty sure that there's a market for this within Glovo. And beside of that, we also get a lot of requests from different teams to host this website, get a domain, whatever. So we actually got started to work on this problem. The overview of this project started, this is the overview of the project. It started more or less a year ago when we initially pitched the idea in the web platform team as an epic. And then we started to research the tech stack and move forward with the project. And then in the first quarter of this year, we got a chance to work on our actual first microsite. So we started to actively developing the microsite, establishing the platform, and then around Q2, end of Q2, we released the first microsite, and then kind of officially split it into our own team, the Microsites Platform. Since then, we got to work on 4 more websites. Out of those 4, we already released 2. I'm going to mention those later on. And nowadays, we are mostly working on the platform itself and iterating on the goals. Right now, we are a team of 4 engineers, 1 product manager, and 1 EM. So let's see the tech choices. Sorry. So in the beginning, we identified 4 main technological decisions or choices to work with. First was Jamstack as a paradigm or architecture to build modern websites. Then Next as a meta framework, or Next.js, sorry, built on top of Vue.js. Then we decided to outsource the infrastructure to a hosting company called Netlify. I'm pretty sure some of you might have heard about it, because we were a bit constrained on time. So we decided it could be a good trade-off to not focusing on the infrastructure in the beginning and try to build the actual websites. And last but not least, the headless CMS, which is a content management system. And the headless stands for it's not coupled with an actual view representation or a view layer. So we need to wrap our own layer or create our own view layer on top of the CMS. So let's go one by one. I'm gonna briefly explain why Jamstack and Nuxt, and later on we'll touch upon the headless CMS. So what is Jamstack? It's a pretty complex topic itself. I try to wrap everything into one slide. So on the left side, you can see a traditional web architecture back in the old days, let's say, and Jamstack architecture on the right. So it was originally an acronym for JAM, which stands for JavaScript API plus markup. But later on, they moved away from it because they think about it as an architectural concept rather than tightly coupling with JavaScript or API or whatever. So it tried to decouple the web experience from the data and business logic by relying on different microservices, different APIs, different so-called third-party pro services. Could be authentication, CMS, databases, whatever. It also mostly relies on static site generation, which means that at the build time, let's say at pipeline instead of so at the pipeline, we're generating all the different existing pages that can have in the website. It ends up outputting HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So basically static website, static files, but that we can easily host on different static website, static hosting solutions. Like in case of Netlify, they have their own, but in terms of AWS, we can just store it in an S3 bucket and then leveraging CloudFront CDN to distribute it all around the globe. It's pretty performant, doesn't require us any maintenance. Whereas the other side, compared to a more traditional, let's say like a WordPress setup, you have your web server running like WordPress itself, which is most of the time connected to either a database or another web server or a CMS. And then on each request that you want to fetch or render a web page, you need to go there, retrieve the data, render the HTML, send back to the client. So it takes a lot of time. Sometimes you can optimize it, of course, by distributing it and everything, but it's not even comparable to a more modern Jamstack architecture. So Nuxt, we're around February, I think, February 2022. Back in the day, Nuxt 2, well, it's still in maintenance mode with only Vue 2 support. We're talking about a time when Vue 3 was released more or less 2 years ago. So it wasn't already too new, too shiny to work with. So we were discussing to work with Vue 3 because that's the latest and greatest solution on the market. So we took a look at Nuxt 3. Nuxt 3 back then was in beta stage for half a year or something. And they promised that they were going to ship a stable release by the end of March. So today is the 18th of November. They released Nuxt 3 2 days ago as a stable release, and they still don't have proper migration guideline from Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3. So even though that we learned that the migration from Vue 2 to Vue 3 can be pretty challenging and painful, we try to avoid that additional work and go with Nuxt 3, but still it was in beta. So we discussed it with actually with Netlify. They provided some recommendations, and there was a framework or solution called Nuxt Bridge. It guaranteed the backward compatibility with Nuxt 2 while enabling Nuxt 3 features. So basically it was all the thing that we were looking for. It's a match made in heaven. We went all in, and then, yeah, it wasn't that good, actually, let's say. Well, it could be a good segue to, or not segue, a good segment in a stand-up as a nailed it or failed it section. It was a bit of a failure because we had a lot of issues, and whenever we had an issue, we didn't really know if it's a Vue 2 issue, a Vue 3 issue, a Next 2 issue, or a Next 3 issue. Where should we look at? There were a lot of incompatibilities with different modules, different libraries, and unfortunately, the community and also the core team moved directly towards Next 3, and they wanted to polish that as much as they could. So yeah, we decided to, even though we launched the first site with Next Bridge, we decided to downgrade it, and right now all of our websites are built with Next 2. And we're elaborating on migrating to Next 3 as soon as we can, and they have a proper migration guideline. So let me introduce you, well, hopefully not introduce because you already visited this website. Our first microsite, which was Glovo Engineering, the showcase of our engineering and data work within our company. It was completely built from the ground up with custom components, multiple iterations, closely working with different stakeholders and designers. We can even call it, this was our guinea pig. But it was a really nice project, and we could use a lot of stuff from here. Then later on, we moved on with another interesting use case that we had called Restaurant Accelerator. This is just this is a website. It's interesting because the website itself existed before, and we decided to migrate to our platform. It was actually done by a third-party provider. They handed over the code, and then we needed to host it anyway. So we said that while we are hosting it, we could always also move it to our platform. This is a pretty common use case that we're expecting to have in the future, that we already have a website built by someone, and then we try to move it to our platform. We also built custom components. It has a bit of different look and feel compared to Glovo Engineering, sorry. Yeah, this was, I would say, a success story, a tiny success story, because this was the seamless website that we worked on, most probably because of complexity, because this is the whole website. It's just a tiny microsite, and this is why micro, a good term. Microsites to showcase or to have a display set of FAQ or an frequently asked questions section with the set of questions and answers for the Italian market when they launched the 800 meal voucher there. So if you're in Italy and you want to know how to use, you want to have some questions about how to use 800 in Glovo, you can just visit this page. And this was the first example that we could deploy it under the glovo.com domain for a specific subpath. So after all, by all these examples, well, I'm pretty sure that some of you might have seen this picture before. We try to follow the lean methodology, and we still keep doing it. And by that, I mean, like, we try to provide immediate value to the customers by launching the websites as fast as we can and continuously iterating on the solution or on the product. So for example, when I mentioned that we could reuse components from existing websites, it meant that we could literally copy pasted the component, because we didn't want to spend time on setting up a component library, setting up, I don't know, automations and so on. So deep in my heart, my inner engineer was a bit crying because there was some components could be pasted 3-4 times in our code base. But this enabled us to work faster, to provide value, and to release and to work on the websites easily without being blocked, or not being blocked, but without having this automation or bureaucracy or whatever we call it set up. But we will do that, or we're actually doing it right now. I'm going to briefly mention that later on. So overall, we try to gather all these learnings, launching different websites, working on different websites, and that eventually led us to have a so-called production readiness list. So we gathered everything into a written guideline, or we can even call it as a checklist. This is like a golden standard where each site or each microsite that we launch and deploy it should comply with all the different requirements that we have in terms of CI/CD, observability, analytics, testing, SEO, security, GDPR, and so on and so on. So with these learnings, I think we could move on to the next level. Typical question, but how does it scale? Sure. I think there are 3 pillars that we can cover here. The first one is a monorepo setup. The second one is a code scaffolder. And the third one is a component library with Prismic slices. Let's start with the monorepo. So right now we moved all the different projects that back in the day had their own repo into a monorepo, where we have 2 main subdirectories. The first one is packages. This is where we encapsulated all the different business logic, the more complex setup like Google Analytics, cookie bouncer for GDPR, etc., into reusable packages. And we have another directory called sites. These are all the sites that we've been working on or we are still working on. This is where we can use all the different libraries by encapsulating the logic. And this is why where my inner engineer gets some relief and know that we're not repeating ourselves. We only have everything in one place. We don't need to copy paste the code anymore. The second crucial part of this story is the scaffolder. So we invested some time to build or to implement a custom programmatic code generator, which is basically enable us to incorporate all the learnings that we had from the production readiness list into actionable code pieces. And by I mean, like right now, if I go to Microsites Platform monorepo and type pm generate microsite sites Glovo and friends.conf, it will generate us next to website with static site generation, with error tracker inside, with the cookie bouncer, with Google Analytics setup, with the UI package setup, and everything by default. It's crucial, or it's going to be really important, because as I mentioned earlier, the scalability issue with microsites is not about the business logic. It's not about how to build the actual microsites. It's going to be, hopefully, it's going to be the number of microsites, so the quantity itself. We can easily have in hundreds of microsites and not knowing or building them over and over again or starting them over and over again from scratch is pretty hard. So this tool is meant to solve, partially meant to solve that problem. And another one is that we could leverage code mods. So we can upgrade the existing microsites, not only create new ones, but we can also upgrade the existing microsites with to make everything backward compatible. So combine this with some sort of templates plus programmatic code generation, we can enable a scalable platform that we can build on top. Last but not least, a component library and Prismic slices. So as I mentioned, most of the microsites are mostly marketing, or they can share a finite amount of components or based on different patterns. So I'm pretty sure if you visit the marketing page or a landing page, you see a hero section, some features, testimonials, for example, or most probably a call to action. And we can have multiple variants of a call to action. In this case, with an image, a description, a title, and a button. So our goal with the component library is to create some sort of reusable sections. So we're not trying to build a design system or low-level components like buttons or links. We're focusing more on the higher level, we can even say organisms in atomic design principles. So higher level organisms, there are sections and can be reused across the pages. Why? Because Prismic, our headless CMS solution, has a really interesting approach as a CMS. So most of the CMSs, you can update the content, the title, the image, links, whatever. But in Prismic, what you can do is that if you have Vue or also React components, then you can actually publish those components, and the content editors that are most probably non-technical people can easily change the look and feel and the content of that component. So in this case, for example, we can upload the same components for the call to action. We can have two variants, one on the left and the one was on the right, and they can choose, okay, I want to have this style, or I'm going to update the style, but also change the text and so on. So it's like a component-driven content management solution or system, which is pretty cool. And with this, we can enable customizability, but only within the boundaries of global design guidelines. So we, as engineers, of course, working with designers, we can publish a set of reusable components that they can choose from. And later on, then they can build a whole website by saying, I want a hero section, I want this feature section, updating the content, and then I want a call to action section, then a footer, and that's it. Speaking of microsites, having micro in the name doesn't mean that we don't need to take care of their health. So we have a pretty extensive dashboard, Datadog dashboard, to monitor all the different uptime, traffic, errors, and of course the web vitals to comply with Google's SEO requirements. Plus, of course, each site has a Google Analytics integration as well. So what are our future plans? We're working right now to extend the component library and to cover most of the use cases that can end up in a marketing website. That would enable us to refine or to reduce the whole process of creating websites from weeks to days, most probably, hopefully, to hours. So in the future, I'm pretty sure we'll have different examples or different use cases to cover, but at the very same time, we hope that all those websites will be launched faster and faster and faster. As I mentioned, we're using Netlify right now. We plan to move everything to our AWS infrastructure as well. And if everything goes well, this will be me in a year or in a half year. So last but not least, I would like to thank our team or everyone who's been working on this project and supported us somehow, because they've done an amazing job. And I'm really looking forward to bring this idea or this concept to the next level and working with you. I'd also like to thank you for the attention, taking the time to listen to my talk. And I hope that you find it useful, and next time you want to build a website or a microsite, you know who to contact.
Thank you very much, Mate. Let's jump with the Q&A. I think that at least we have one question. I will read it out loud. So, do you think we could use microsites for some parts of the actual customer web app, like FAQ, legal map, perhaps even global page? In my opinion, the only challenge there are translations. Other than that, content is pretty static there. So
yes, this is a really good question. Yeah, we already iterated, or we already discussed this idea before. And so far, since we launched the FAQ for the Italian market for the meal voucher, I think there's no blocker to do that. And regarding the localization or translations, we already have an example. We're actively working on, I'm not sure if I can tell, but yeah, the current blog, the blog.glovo.com migration to our platform, and it has 7 or 8 different languages. So yeah, we can support it, and I think there's no blocker on that.
Perfect. Any more questions, chat, please? Okay, Mateusz is asking again. So you mentioned you focus more on coarse-grained components, not small ones, buttons, etc. Do you think it will make sense to have shared components library with those smaller ones shared between microsites like customer web, admin panel, etc.?
Yeah, it's so in general, marketing websites and web applications, I think, have different requirements. the lower level components like buttons or input fields could be the same. So we're planning to incorporate Helio at some point, for example, and we will be building on top of Helio, I think, at some point. But the bigger like organisms could be a bit different. For example, in admin, there are a lot of forms, like huge forms, big tables. We don't really see those in marketing websites, or rarely.
Totally agree. I have one more question. Like, I think you mentioned already a bit on the tech stack and so on, but if you could remake your choices, would you have changed something if you were to start this project again from the beginning?
Yeah, it's funny because we had a conversation within our team. We even discussed to use React at some point, or Next.js. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we already kind of invested a lot into the Vue ecosystem. We have a lot of tooling around that. So overall, I think it was a good decision. I'm a bit disappointed personally as the next with the next framework. But the third version, it's pretty cool. It's amazing. I can't wait to move everything to Vue 3 and Next 3, and hopefully we can stay there in the foreseeable future without breaking and migrating everything over and again. But unfortunately, it will take some time, and that's why I'm not that happy. But yeah.
I mean, I assume that after the Next conference, you got some idea of the next steps on Next. Yeah. We have another question from Dan. What will happen if a microsite has so much success and no longer wants to be a microsite any longer?
Well, good question. I think we need to define the boundaries. Where are we still considering something as a microsite? I mean, we already have a general understanding, but from this perspective, what if it grows a lot and then becomes not a monolithic solution, but like a huge website? We haven't considered this option, to be honest, because most of the things are pretty simple. The only drawback that we identified that could be a tricky question in the future: what if a microsite has, I don't know, thousands of pages? But for that use case, we already have different solutions on the market, like incremental static regeneration or distributed persistent rendering, where we can delay the different rendering and reuse serverless functions or even edge functions to generate the pages on demand and then store it in the CDN. So I think the only drawback in that could be the scale or the number of pages. But in that case, we can get back to this topic.
Will it be easy to eject a microsite outside of the microsite infrastructure?
Yeah, because it's just a next step.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mate. Any more questions? We are putting you on a limit, Mate. That's why I lived in time, to challenge you. Nice. I think that we don't have any more questions. So I want to say thank you very much, Mate.
Thank you.
This is going to be recorded. So if